Hey folks, Shin Lacoste here with another segment at All Wise Transformation where we talk about mental health, spiritual practice, and self care. And I have an awesome guest with us. Tina, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, beautiful people. My name is Terna Tilley-Gyado. I use she, her pronouns, and I've recently begun to identify as an androgynous woman, since that is often how people perceive me with confusion. So I'm embracing that as someone who's also just recently become breastless. So I am a Tiv and Bassa person. My people come from Benue State in Nigeria and from the Bassa people in Liberia. And I am a first generation person, US born and mostly US raised. I've lived in many different places, including 5 other countries, in addition to lots of places in the US. And I consider myself a living bridge. A lot of what I'm here for is about bridging. It's about bringing things together that are considered to not normally dwell in the same place. What is it to be queer and African, actually, in this modern age that we're in after with the advent of colonization? What is it to be a Black person in America who, well, I recently found out I do actually have this thread of ancestry of folks who were enslaved in the US, but I didn't know that until recently. And so, what is it to be a Black person in the US who does not have the same story, who's not sharing the same Black story in this country? So there's lots of ways that, I work as a bridge. And I think even the bridge of being an androgynous person, even though I very much feel myself to be a cisgender woman, being someone who is often misgendered, especially more now so that I'm totally flat chested, what is it to bridge perception, perception and reality. So lots of conversations in that realm. And I consider that part of my vocation is really here to be an advocate for inner freedom, to serve other folks to experience inner freedom. And I do that as a somatic psychotherapist. I do that as a priestess in the Ifa tradition. I do that as someone who does pastoral work with queer Muslims, queer and trans Muslims. I do that as an intuitive body worker, an energy worker, and as an artist and performer. And I love to dance, I love to have fun. And, I didn't come here to suffer, in the words of Lady Dunley. Not more than absolutely necessary, at least. So let the rest at least be joyful and full of life. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen a couple of your performances, which I absolutely love. I think the last one was sort of like a more intimate one where you're sort of talking about sort of your personal journey, and that was really well done. Yeah. So I usually like to start. Sometimes I forget, but I remember now. But I like to start off of what what are you curious about? What gets your curiosity going?
Pretty much everything. I'm someone who really is curious about life. What is it to exist? What is it to be a creation in creation? What an amazing thing that we're a part of. It's amazing to exist at all. All of my curiosity runs to really what is life? What is life in this body? What is it to be in a body? I spend a lot of time curious about that. How can I know and feel my own body with the finest subtlety? Because in being able to do that, to have that intimate relationship within my own vessel, what I'm able to heal is incredible. What I'm able to access in terms of my own gifts and how I'm able to express them, how I'm able to receive love, all of that has to do with how deeply I can feel my own existence in this physical flesh, right? So spend a lot of time curious about that and just energy in general. How does energy work? How does it work in the body? How does it work in relationship with our environment? How does it work with our relationship with the divine? And I think a lot about our relationships with the divine, and what is it to be in alignment, actually? How do we live deeply from a place of alignment? even when that alignment has us going against what expectations are on us, whether, wherever they come, societal, familial, whatever indoctrinations and trainings, we've received. So I think a lot about that. I think a lot about music, curious about music, and just like inhabiting a song is just one of my favorite things to play with. I think curiosity for me is really about play and being able to play with whatever it is that has my attention and interest, So I'm curious about you, Eshin. I'm curious about, people. I'm curious about all kinds of things, really. But fundamentally, I would say curious about the divine. That's the thread that runs through it all. Astrology, the occult arts, as they're called, the mystic arts. I belong to a Sufi order, so very interested in all of the inner dimensions, which are reflections of the dimensions of existence.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm just so fascinated with the idea and the feeling and the existence of being beings living on a ball of dirt that's flying through space, that's going around a sun, that's going around a universe. Like, to me, that just like, it blows my mind, in comparison to like that greatness and to like the smallness of what we are, as well as the bigness of what we are. It's just, I don't know, sometimes it's so divine. Sometimes it really catches me off guard of how lucky we are to be able to sort of experience this and move through this, and sometimes tragedy, right? Like, and being able to hold that duality, the dialectic aspect of like the scariness of like, oh my gosh, if something goes off, we could like lose our gravity and go flying off into space.
Right. We could get hit by an asteroid, which they're saying is going to happen in 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I just find that just so fascinating how like various sequences of disasters, throughout the planet's history had to happen for us to be able to thrive, to be here. I find that so fascinating, personally.
It's endlessly fascinating. Just to me, you wake up. So far, I've woken up every day. I'm still here, right? It's amazing. You're here. That's just absolutely incredible. It's incredible that we exist at all. It's just, so to me, I see like boredom is not something I really experience,
When you say you don't experience it, like, can you say a little bit more about that?
I don't really get bored. Because why? What is there to be bored about? I'm endlessly fascinating to myself, right? Even at a basic level, and I don't even mean that in a conceited way, but just that each of us is a microcosm of the macrocosm. And so there is a way that the more we understand our own parts, our own beings, and we understand ourselves in relationship to life, that is a mirror of a larger cosmic story, So where is the boredom in there? Where is it? I haven't found it yet personally.
Do you think for most folks the boredom it's because you're so inwardly attached to the ego in a way where you feel you're not productive, or you feel like you're not accomplishing things or doing things? Like, do you think that the boredom is sort of like an ego aspect?
I think it can certainly be that, I think boredom in and of itself is actually quite an interesting thing. There's studies that we actually need boredom in order to spark creativity. Because when I think of boredom and why I say I don't get bored, I think of boredom as being kind of like a lack of imagination. It's a moment where I'm not engaging with my imagination in whatever way, that however small that way might be, like there's a momentary separation. So, and I think that separation can happen for lots of reasons, So yeah, for all of the reasons that you named, I think it can happen because the worlds that we seem to have access to, for someone who's in a very sheltered environment, for example, it might just seem very small, right? Like what your imagination has been allowed to expand to, which is what makes all of these book bans and the attacks on education especially disturbing, is because the narrowness, I think narrowness can create boredom.
Yeah.
So, but I think there's lots of reasons that people experience it. And I don't actually think it's a negative thing. I think it's negative if we hold it with arrogance. And a lot
Mm.
of people hold boredom with arrogance. And what I
Mm.
mean by that is like, I'm so bored. Like, there's just nothing to do, right? Like, to me, that's holding it with a certain kind of arrogance, like,
Yeah.
and so, and we do that, whatever our version is of that attitude, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah. And just hearing you sort of like play that out feels like I want to be entertained. Entertain me. Give me something to be amused by, right? And so it has that sort of flavor to it.
Exactly. And what is entertainment? Well, if we look from a spiritual perspective, entertainment is actually something that we're mostly encouraged away from, in the sense that it's a distraction, right? So we can say, and I'm not saying don't watch TV. I want, don't listen to it's not that, right? But it is to say that if the goal is to take you away from yourself, which is the place through which you experience your relationship with the divine, if your relationship, if the distraction is to take you away from that, that is where entertainment, as an ongoing steady state desire, is not beneficial. And of course, sometimes, yes, you're overwhelmed, the pain is too much, you need a moment. Like, yes, have your moment, but don't get stuck in seeking to have your moment. That's the thing. Don't get stuck in chasing. That's the issue, is then it becomes a chase to just keep feeding. That's what is boredom. If you don't have, your attention span cannot last more than 10 seconds, that's a problem, And that's the world that we're living in, more and more so, where young, and the brains of the people who are being born now are shaped in that.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, believe it or not, folks, I did invite Tina here to talk about self trust.
It's related. I
Yeah,
think it's related.
yeah.
Yeah.
How do you define for self trust? Like when you hear that term, that word, self trust, like what comes into mind for you?
Yeah, fundamentally for me, self trust is a spiritual right. It is a right to be able to trust yourself, because self trust, how do we experience it? For me, when I say self trust, I'm talking about intuition. I'm talking about self knowing. I'm talking about the inherent wisdom with which each of us was born. Now, people will be like, but there's definitely some fools in the world. And you're right. There are definitely some fools in the world. I'm not going to argue with you on that. I'm not saying there are not fools. What I'm saying is, even a fool has been allotted the appropriate amount of wisdom for their situation and what they came here for. And so, for the life that they came here to have, they do need to be able to trust them. All of us need to be able to trust ourselves in order to actually live the destiny that we came here to live. Because the self-trust, the intuition, the instincts, that just knowingness that you have sometimes, however you experience it, that is God speaking to us. That is God speaking to us. And so if we are in a situation where we do not trust the voice of God within ourselves, we have a serious issue that disrupts our ability to achieve the purpose for which we came to the planet. So, self trust, to me, the voice of God within our own being, experienced as intuition, a knowingness, instinct, gut feeling. Some people have sensations that tell them, like, yes, go this way, a voice, whatever it is for you, however it is that when you know, that's what we're talking.
Do you think it's a matter of distinguishing between the somatic aspect, the cognitive aspect, or sort of like that sort of just trusting, right? Because I think sometimes for me that self trust, I sort of have to sort of settle in my body, and I know if I'm anxious, I know if I'm feeling depression or feeling any kind of feeling, I don't necessarily trust myself in making that decision, and sometimes I just have to sort of be silent and like just focus inward and being like, what's pulling me in what direction? Do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? And sometimes I don't know, like settling into the body is I don't know, it's a practice. It's a mindfulness aspect where you have to be able to get comfortable with that silence, right? Sort of like going back to what you said, how we sort of started, like boredom provides you the space to sort of slow down, to sort of like be tuned to the moment, because it just gives you that space to be like, okay, everything is silent, everything's slowed down. This is sort of like a transition, right? Like when you're getting off the highway, like there's a pause, like you're sort of like, okay, where do I go? Do I make a left? Do I make a right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's, I think that is the thing that, a lot of people are afraid, first of all, because they've been living so far outside of their self knowing. They're afraid of what they're going to have to do when they finally listen. That's the thing. That's a big thing, So many people make decisions knowing it's the wrong direction, because so and so wants me to do it for this reason that's outside of me, that reason that's outside of me, this one that's outside of me, And that has, the cost of that is so high. It's so high. And so, but if that's been what you live in, if that's what you've been trained in, because I do think because of colonization, I call the disruption of self-trust one of the primary wounds of colonization. One of the primary tools that sustains and maintains colonization as an entity that continues to live in the present, externally and predominantly internally. Colonization continues because it's also an internal process. So what part of that process is we get cut off from our bodies. A lot of people, we're out here walking around and you're like, can you feel your heartbeat? No, unless I'm in a panic, right? Mm-hmm. Are you able to actually pay attention and just move your awareness through your body? Can you move your awareness through your body? Can you feel from the inside your hand, your toe? We don't get that training. Most people are not getting trained in how to notice what's happening in your body beyond, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Do you need to use the bathroom? Are you tired? What'd you say?
Are you horny?
Are you horny? Right? Basic functions, right? But most of us are not getting intentional training around how to notice the mind, body, spirit continuum in ourselves, right? So to me, there's the training. It requires training because we live so far outside. We're born living so far outside of it, And so it's about how do you actually recognize, because it's a question I ask people. How do you know things, right? So Eshin, you gave your answer or some answer, although I wonder, is there more that you would say in response to that question of how do you know what you know when you know?
What comes to mind, there's like this early memory I have of some friends inviting me to a Quaker meeting for the very first time. And I've never been to a Quaker meeting. I come from a Protestant Catholic background, and it's usually somebody talking at you about sort of spiritual or religious something. And I was at this Quaker meeting, and I was just sort of sitting there for the first time, and I did some reading about just holding space to allow whatever to sort of move through you to speak or not speak. And I have to say, for the first time, going back to what you were saying, I felt my heartbeat. At first I was like, what's that noise? and And I took a moment to sort of really pay attention. At first, I thought it was like something outside of me, and then I realized it was my heart beating. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm actually hearing my heart," because I was quiet and still enough to be able to give space for me to listen intently. And the most beautiful thing happened. The gentleman across from me started talking about how we take our hearts for granted. And it was sort of like at that moment, I realized there was sort of like this intentional focus inwards. And if I listen to that, that either guides me or radiates in a particular direction where either somebody else will vibe with me or it will send me in a direction that I sort of feel or I need to go into. I think ever since then I've been able to, at times, sometimes I'm not so good at it because I get in my head. But when I'm still enough, I'm able to go back to that same experience. And it's not exactly the same, but just going back to that experience of just listening to my heart, and where it wants to pull me. And yeah, that was sort of like that first experience of like, yeah, when I'm having trouble making a decision about should I do X, Y, and Z, and you and I have sort of talked about how I'm sort of like in this transition life of what do I do next, and you sort of provided me the space to remember, oh right, like either I find a sounding board or I sort of just slow down a little bit, and I think for me that's when I really paid attention to that inner knowing or inner guide or whatever folks want to call it.
That's beautiful. That's very beautiful. You speak about the heart and you speak about stillness. And one of the things that I think every human being should know is that the magnetic field of the heart is much more powerful than that of the brain. And so we are designed, we come here, we're born with an incredible design that has our hearts be the smartest part of us, actually. Literally, it's the smartest part of us in terms of all of the things, the connections and things that are going on there, right? And so, and it extends 30 feet out from our bodies, the magnetic field of the heart. So we know that the heart is essential to not only as a physical organ, of course, but as an organ of living, experiencing life, of making decisions, of following what I call the divine breadcrumb trail, is the heart. And so each of us has to find our way home to being able to live from this place. And, people will be like, well, but what about this situation and that situation? This, all of they go argue. They want to argue. That's cool. You can argue.
Yeah.
And I think what we can all agree on is we all know that feeling. Everyone has tasted that feeling, however fleeting it was, where maybe you just knew who was going to be calling you, or you were thinking of something, or something just told you go this way, or you just had a feeling about this person, or all of us have had that, or don't go this way, we have had some taste of the voice within speaking to us. All of us have tasted that.
To your comfort level, what's your earliest memory of sort of trusting yourself?
I think I'm unusual to some extent in the sense that I tried. That is something that has just been true about me. I don't go in a direction I don't want to go in for the most part. And I don't care what people think about it. I don't like that none of that influences. If I know I'm supposed to go left, I will definitely go left. And my earliest memory of what I consider to be my commitment to that is actually at age 2. And I was at a babysitter's house. She had put me down for a nap. And I remember looking at the ceiling and just feeling the presence of the divine, feeling the presence of spirit, this loving, warm, expansive presence. And I knew at 2 that that is what I wanted to be guiding my whole life. That was what I was attuned to. That is what I related to that would move me through my life. So I came here with that. And, I really have stood on that because at the end of the day, what I know for sure is the times that I have not listened, disaster. It's been painful, it hadn't been great. And that's not to say, of course, in listening to whatever that voice is inside of you, you are it's not going to save you from experiencing what you're here to experience, which includes pain for all of us.
Yeah.
It's not going to save you from pain, because that's part of living here. That's part of this existence. However, it will save you from unnecessary pain.
Yeah.
It will save you from unnecessary hardship and damage,
Yeah.
So to me, that's because I've tasted that, and it's so bitter when you don't listen to yourself. And then, we all know.
Yeah, no, it's a very sort of jarring feeling, like sort of after the situation, like, oh, man, I really should have listened to myself. I felt it, the vibration was off, or what was going on just did not feel right, and then
Exactly. And do you want to experience that again? No.
No.
Cautionary tales are told by the heart at the appropriate moment.
Do you think there's a difference between the self-trust that you show to yourself compared to the one that you show to the world? Like, for me, sometimes I struggle with that, in the sense of I've always been sort of like dedicated about like getting my education, and there's sort of like a lot of things have been sort of sacrificed for that, and I'm completely okay with that. But then there's sort of like a part of me that says, am I trusting myself in a direction that feels right for me, or am I trusting myself in a direction that feels, going back to what you said, colonialism and capitalism, they sort of go hand in hand, where they sort of muddle the idea of your goal or your purpose, and even that word purpose is a very sort of slight capitalistic idea, right? Like, asking a 5-year-old, what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know. I don't know what I want to be, an astronaut. And if you don't turn out to be that, then does that mean that you didn't know yourself well enough, or you didn't know your path? And so I'm curious, like, do you feel like there is a difference between the knowing of me compared to the knowing of being present in the world, or is there no difference?
I mean, I think that there's like a lot of shoulds,
Mm-hmm.
We're gliding in a world of shoulds. You should do this, you should want that, you should follow this path, you should. We live in that. And that voice has nothing to do with you uniquely. It had nothing to do with any of us uniquely. It's like an entity. And that entity doesn't care whether it's appropriate for whoever it's passing through. And so we are sold on, this is for everybody, right? And it's not. It's not appropriate for most people, actually, And so that's, again, we're born into a world that already is trying to break us from our self-trust, And that's part of how it's done, because then it's telling you, this is the miles kids, we absorb things at every age so deeply and with such subtlety. What kids pick up and understand based on what they're reading and feeling through their little bodies, right, is stunning. That's why those shows like Kids Say the Darndest Things are so interesting, because they get it, They may not be able to talk about it with sophistication, but they understand discrepancy. They understand go this way or feel ashamed. They understand, right? Do this and for belonging. They understand if you don't do this, you'll be an outcast, right? And then that becomes priority, because essential belonging, essential to feel secure in your situation, So for good reasons. And so we're born into that fragmentation. And the knowing that you have, Eshin, if you had the opportunity to be in an environment where self-trust as a default was the go-to, I see some amazing parenting moves where parents are doing that. They are prioritizing the self-knowing of their children. And it's stunning because the kids know. So if you're living a life where that is what's being encouraged, that's what's being fostered, right? Then you can say, because that's your main imprint, you can look at this matrix and be like, I'm not buying this, that, and the third, but I like that one. I'll take that. I'll do that. Yeah, I'll work with that. Whatever. But there's choice as opposed to being swept into. So many people talk about, I just woke up and found myself in this life that I don't actually enjoy, right? So many people, because I had to get through school and then I was going to start living. I had to do this, achieve this alleged milestone in order to start living.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think like you growing up in an immigrant family. So my folks are from Haiti, and again, like not putting my folks down. I think they did the best they could with the resources they had, with the opportunities that were presented. But I spent a lot of time alone, and I think there wasn't really a direction in that, and so I think that left a lot of ambiguity about what should I be focusing on, or what my desires are, or what my passions are, or what my motivation is. And so it just left a lot of space where I didn't have the ability to figure that out. And so I think there's this thing that sort of happens when we're looking at trusting of the self, where it's like, well, I only need to sort of like accomplish X, Y, and Z, and then in the future I will be better, right? And so it's sort of like that future tripping, in the sense of I am not necessarily here, but I am sort of disassociating because I want to be there. And why am I not there yet? And that again, I think it's sort of disembodying, because you're sort of not in yourself, and so then you don't trust yourself. You have a hard time hearing yourself because you're so focused outwardly, and because you're so focused outwardly, there's this anxiety that happens. That the anxiety sort of even muddles everything else. That it's really difficult, and then on top of that, right? Like sort of a capitalist society where it's purposely built, where it wants zombies to sort of like we all have to make a living. Like I'm not bashing that, but there is this sort of like fine line of, am I living for living, or am I living just to live?
right, that's right.
And I think some people have the luxury to be able to ask themselves that, and some people don't, and some people just can't necessarily get out of their own way to listen long enough, because it's a very scary thing to sort of be with yourself.
It can
And
be.
by yourself.
It can be. It can be. And often, though, when that fear is there, like I said, before, it's pointing to a likelihood that when you actually do listen and be with yourself, that true essence is going to require change.
Yeah.
And especially if you're comfortable materially speaking, who wants what? Yeah, I got a secure living situation. You want me to do what? Hippity hoop hop? I remember one time I was living in New York, and which is my American hometown. I'd been teaching. I'd gone into a nonprofit job, and I was just like, I don't really want to be here. New York City is very draining for me as an energetically sensitive person. But I hadn't quite formulated, like, where am I going to go? What am I, none of that. But I was dating someone who lived in Philadelphia. So I would go, I was spending time there. And I had a dream one night, and the dream was I was in a kitchen, and something told me that I had to stop what I was doing immediately, leave the house immediately, and go to this location. So I was in the midst of cooking. I stopped everything, and I opened the door, and I went to wherever I was supposed to go. And I ended up walking along a cemetery wall, and there was an owl along the wall that hopped along with me. And basically this owl communicated to me that the way that I had gone to get to this location was much more circuitous than it needed to be, and that I actually could have gone in a straight line. And when I woke up, I knew that I had to leave New York and I had to do it by the end of the year. It was mid-November. I just knew that that's
Wow.
what that was.
Wow.
There was no other thing. The clarity of it was
Yeah.
complete.
Yeah.
So I'm comfortable. I got a good paying job. My apartment is cool and I've been there for some years. My life is fine enough. I didn't need to move tomorrow, you know? And so to get a message that says, actually, yes, you do.
Yeah.
And basically, if you don't, you understand the consequence is going to be, who knows, maybe years of your life that could have been much shorter getting to where you need to go. And so I said, woo, this is scary. What? I was tripping. I was like, this is wild. I was like, is this really? Is it real? Because, of course, that's the common refrain in the self trust fragmentation chorus.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
this real? Is this true? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so, but I believed myself because it was so clear.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, Spirit, I'll make a deal. Let's make a deal. If a place opens up in Philadelphia, great. Because also the dream was clear that it needed to be Philadelphia. If it opens up that I can get in there and move in for January 1st, that would be great. If I can get out of my lease that I'm just 3 months into, I'll take that as a sign that everything's going to work out. And as a third condition, also, if my job will allow me to keep a project so at least I have some income, all three of those things happen. And so
Whoa.
December 30th, I was in a U-Haul truck moving
Ah,
to Philadelphia.
I love that. Oh my God.
Yeah. So I just say that to say, everything that I'm saying is from living. It's
Yeah.
not a
Yeah.
theory to me. It's not an
Yeah.
idea, it's not a notion, it's not a
Yeah.
should.
Yeah.
It's based on my own life experience. And it's
Please.
risky. Self-trust in this world is risky. That's
Yeah.
true. It's true.
Yeah.
If you are actually going to be in alignment with what that voice is saying to you, it is risky and you will be taking some risks. True.
Yeah,
Facts.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Right, and I think I don't know if this is the right term, but like I think the negotiation or the middle ground is letting go of the judgment, letting go of the perfectionism, right? Letting go of the expectation, because you had a really good job. You're in New York City. Like, who does not want? Everybody wants to sort of live that New York lifestyle.
No, they don't, though, right? Actually, right? It's not
Yeah.
appropriate for all of us, but we're
Yeah.
sold.
Yes, yeah, 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 yeah. That sort of capitalist idea of that you need to have X, Y, and Z to be successful. And I think internally, right, it's like going back to what you said, if I don't do this, it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. It just means that it's gonna take you longer and there might be more stumbling blocks that needs to be there.
Yes,
But
yes.
I do agree with you. It is a risk, but anything is a risk. Like, the moment you step out your door, that's a risk, right?
That's
And,
what we need to understand. Even breathing is a risk with all the microplastics in the air, pollution. So it's true. Just existing in the world as it is today is a risk. To
yeah,
be a person, it has always been a risk. An
yeah,
animal's gonna get you. You gonna snap something and you don't know nothing about medical treatment or you're on a mountain. Anything
yeah,
could happen at any time. That was always true.
yeah, yeah.
So it's just now it feels like the things that can happen are many more swords in a way.
So do you feel like for you this is a non-judgmental practice in the sense of like I'm going to listen to myself and I'm not necessarily going to put a judgment on decision. It's feeling like this is the direction I need to go into, and so no judgment needs to be placed on that decision, because if I'm being called or my vibration is being tugged in this particular direction, then I don't need to sort of second guess it, right? I don't need to sort of like put any other whatever shoulds onto it. And so
Yeah.
so for you, like how do you sort of practice this sort of non-judgmental piece if I'm in the right ballpark?
You are in the right because it is inherently non-judgmental for me, partially because some of the things I've been called to do are things that I would not necessarily have chosen to do consciously, but because I understood them as callings on my life at that time, I did them, you know? And so for me it's about following divine instruction, actually. That's really because each of us came here to bring a very particular thing, you know? We came here to radiate a particular thing. And for me, part of why the world is the trash, trashy in the ways that it's trashy is because there's a lot of people who are not on track where they actually are supposed to be on track. Got a lot of people not in the lane that they're supposed to be in, i.e., as we see in the government, people in positions they have absolutely zero business being in. So many people are living that as their lives. And so what I understand is that that's my whole job. I just need to be on my situation. I can't be on your situation. I'm not supposed to be in your situation. You're not supposed to be in my situation. And if I think I'm supposed to be in your situation, from here is going to be problems and circuitous routes that we don't need. So I don't judge it because partially it's taking me to amazing places that my own imagination would never have gotten me to. What an incredible thing that is. What an incredible thing that is. I never would have thought this is looks like this is my first time saying this, but I just think it's really interesting that being gay would save my life. Isn't that a word? So from being a child and having the feeling, starting to recognize, okay, I think I'm gay, I am gay, all of that. It led me to what? I'm still gay, so I'm in a gay relationship. And through that, through relationship, someone caring for me, right? Enough to be like, hey, go get this thing checked out. Go get a thing checked out that turns out to be cancer, right? And we can then take the appropriate steps. I can say whatever my cancer story is, it actually started 40 years ago, 35 years ago, because I'm gay and I trusted myself to allow that to be true in my expression of my life. That saved my life, right? As an example. And so God has just taken me to incredible places. I cannot tell you the numerous and uncountable experiences that I've had where trusting that voice, even when it was telling me to do wild things that would disrupt my entire life, and I did it, and the results were miracles, that's how I can listen without judgment. Because what happens when you're in alignment is stunning. If you meet it with receptivity and not with entitlement. You could be on track, but if you're arrogant and you think that it was all, for example, the illusion, it was all me, I did everything. No, that's not it. Meet that alignment with the receptivity, because receptivity is the cycle. We need the cycle to keep flowing. We want the cycle to keep flowing. We want that balance. Self-trust also helps us to be in balance.
Oh, yeah. It's one of those things where it's like going back to how I think we started in the sense of the beautiful thing about life is acknowledging and accepting that the pattern, whatever that pattern is part of the journey. And sometimes we may not know in that particular chapter or in that particular, gas station stop what the next mile is going to look like. And then being able to sort of see the bigger picture and not sort of be a victim of like, why me? Why did I get cancer? Like, oh, why did this happen to me? And again, it's horrible. I'm not saying like that's the only way for spiritual growth and self-compassion and sort of insight to happen, but it's part of it. It's part of the journey, and I think it goes back to this idea about like how glorious it is. Can I say that it's so fucking scary?
Yes, yes. Tell the truth. It's so scary. It really is. It really, really is. And
Yeah.
even in camp, and that's the thing is like, I think sometimes people might think, well, you talking about self-trust. Some of us fill in the blank, for this reason or that reason. This is why I can't trust myself. And look, if somebody want to have that conversation with me, we can work through it because I absolutely understand. Of course, some of us have had such experiences of such fragmented self-trust that in the healing process, if we never actually had a frame of reference for self-trust, right? How do you get there if you didn't have the frame of reference? How do you recover that, right? That's a real question. That is a real question. And there's some things about that. But, even in the cancer journey, I was called to do things that were scary. I would rather not have. I would rather not have. But, at the beginning of my cancer journey, it was going to be one kind of surgery. It was going to be arduous. It was going to be, surgery, radiation, and maybe who knows what else, right? And then more testing came along, and I knew I got to have a bilateral mastectomy. I just knew. I just knew, right? People could argue with me either. Yes, that makes sense. No, you'd be more conservative, this and that. But I knew inside of myself. And so then we come back after the surgery, and the doctor says that was a good choice, a great choice, she said, actually, because there was way more in there than what we thought. Wow. On the side that didn't have a tumor, allegedly, but things were on the turn, right? Wow. So had I not listened to myself, I would have found myself in a situation where more surgery, more anxiety, more problems, basically, I made this choice, no radiation. No, I got to do other treatment, but not that, Self-trust did that for me because I chose to listen to the voice of God speaking through my own heart. And it was scary. What? You want me to lose more body parts than what I had thought? I don't know about that. Like, really? Do I have to? No, yeah. You don't have to, but find out, Great. I don't want to find out. Thing over here, so it's not harder over there, Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Like, I can't even begin to turmoil to have to come to that decision.
Yeah, but that's the thing about it is that it wasn't a lot of turmoil in the end because where the turmoil could get in is when I brought in doubt and I said, maybe that's not such a good, maybe, no. When doubt was introduced, then turmoil came, right. Feelings about what I knew to be true, definitely. Hard to process, definitely, hard, not turmoil though, because I know if I trust, I will be met in the leap that I am taking.
So we're gonna wind down, and I'm curious about what are some feedback, maybe advice. Sometimes I might struggle with that word, advice, or suggestions, practical things that you can suggest for folks to do to be a little bit more in tune. I know we sort of talked a lot about some of those, but what are some stuff that you could sort of highlight that folks can do to really zone into their self?
Yeah, so I would really encourage folks to get into a body-based practice of your choice. And, and we of course distinguish because some people use exercise as a distraction. If you use exercise as distraction, that's not, don't take this and run away with that. No, that's not what we're talking about.
That would be me.
So just to be clear, if that's you, this one is not for you. Balance, So, but having a body-based practice, I think, is very helpful. Whatever that is that sparks, for you. But here's some things to consider about what that practice should be giving. Like, how do you know that it's contributing to you? Let's say it like that. So one is that instead of you feeling pulled out of your body, you feel like it brings you in more. So there's some sense of dropping into yourself more fully. So that might be like you notice your breath more. It might be that colors are brighter. It might be some kind of sensory something. It might be a sensation, whatever it is for you, but something that lets you know that it's sinking me into myself in a deeper way. So that is a hallmark of a body-based practice. Another one is that it's a practice that allows you to be more present, because self-trust requires presence. So if it's facilitating you to really be present, wonderful, right direction. So I'll say those two things as hallmarks. Another thing is people talk about meditation, and I do too, because it's good. Do it. And whatever form of meditation works for you, some people will be like, oh, but I can't do stillness, which again, that's something else that I think all of us need to be trained in. Even if you're one of those people that's naturally got that buzz energy going, even you should know how to be in stillness sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Because even at that high frequency, you can burn yourself out. So we need balance. We need balance, right? So some sort of, look, I'm going to say it like this, some kind of stillness practice of your choice, because that doesn't always mean sitting still, right? Stillness can be cultivated in movement. Also, that's hence we have those labyrinths, those, walks that people do, right? Meditative walks. So some kind of stillness practice, because those practices, how do you know if it's right for you? It should drop you deeper into yourself. If you're walking around and you're just distracted by everything, that ain't for you. Then, then go sit down.
And you're not talking about walking around with a podcast playing in your ear.
That's right. Not that, but if you're walking is one of the things that I do when I really need to get and hear myself clear, hear that voice clearly. I'll walk a lot, because that helps me. There's something about the motion, the consistency of the movement that allows me to have a stillness inside. So some people experience that with running or, whatever. So do that. So body practice, body-based practice, stillness practice. And I would say a regular check-in practice. Develop the habit of asking yourself intentionally, what do I want? What's the voice saying to me now about the most mundane of things, like food, or do you really want to watch TV? Yes, that's your habit maybe, but do you actually want to?
Yeah.
Do that with anything that's a habit. Do I actually want to? What's the voice telling me about this? I used to be a smoker, not a heavy smoker, but a smoker. I started out smoking one cigarette a night, having my sort of romantic spiritual moment late at night. It was very, very emo. And I did that for a long time. And then, and some people out here smoking a pack a day with no problems. I'm not built for that. I'm not even built for one a day. So my body got to a point and it was like, so if you have one more, you're gonna have a problem,
That's how I think that's how I officially, because I was also a smoker, I think that's how I officially, I got really, really sick when, it was like a lung kind of thing, coughing, hacking, it was just, anyway. I was like, I think I need to stop.
Right. So you listen to the voice, right? You could have overrode that, which, I did definitely override that voice multiple times, but eventually it was like, okay, red flag, red flag, red flag, right? So, but that you cultivate a practice of asking the questions, do I want this? How does this actually feel here,
Would you recommend folks journaling that?
Absolutely. Journal, do a audio diary if that's more accessible for you, but have some reflection, some way that you're actually reflecting. And so I would start with those things and see how it goes. I got to say one more thing, of course, ancestor practice. So because we're talking about a process that was affected for most, all of us, through colonization, which our ancestors experienced in the ways that we have inherited, it's very important as part of that intentional remembrance process that we consciously connect our thread to our ancestors. Because part of what we are recovering is what's in our cells, what's in our DNA, the knowing there's the knowing that's God's voice in us about us. There's the knowing that we carry as lineages. There's the knowing that's transmitted across generations. And that is part of our right as well, to have that, so that the wholeness of our heart is as complete as it can be in this human experience. So ancestor practice.
Yeah. And that's something that I've also been cultivating as an ancestry practice, and I have to say that it has really shifted my relationship with some family members. So I'd highly recommend that.
Definitely, it's a very deep process. And I'm gonna throw it out here right now, just so that you don't then have to go look somewhere else to figure out how do I get started. Very simple. A lot of people ask, well, I don't know the names of so-and-so. So let's break a couple things down real quick. We're talking about ancestors. That does not mean every blood relative of yours, okay? That's not what that means. If you were adopted, I'm going to say more about that in a minute, but if you were adopted, there's a relationship you have with the lineage that you were adopted into, and you do still also have a blood lineage. So when we say ancestors, when we talk about ancestors in terms of blood lineage, we're not talking about your relative that did some ill stuff. We're not talking about that person. That's not an ancestor. That's an ancestor biologically, not spiritually. Spiritually, ancestor is a position that is earned through your living. That's what we're talking about. Ancestors inhabit a specific spiritual plane and have the ability to help and support the lives of their descendants. But that has to be a conscious relationship. This is part of the rules. So they could do emergency services like save your life in various ways, protect you from major harm, those types of things. But to have that regular relationship, that has to be intentional. All you don't need to know the names. You're going to introduce yourself and basically juice up the channel. And one way that you can do that is very simple. You're going to set up a space, whatever space you can give. I recommend using a white cloth. Some people do, different traditions have different base layers, but I recommend a white cloth. And you need a glass for water and a white candle. That's all you require, actually. Okay? So then you're going to speak and introduce yourself. I, Tana Tilley-Gyado, daughter of so-and-so and so-and-so. And then if I don't know any names, if I don't even know those names, daughter of my parents, granddaughter of my grandparents, great-grand, call upon my benevolent ancestors to connect with me. Boom. It's a relationship, so that means we keep that cycle of receptivity and giving going. So we give offerings to our ancestors. That's what the water is. So each day, you're just going to go ahead, take a little water, and speak to your ancestors, greet them. If you have names, call the names. The thing about names, if you're not sure about someone, if you get a funny feeling, do not include them on your altar. Don't include them. Or something changes and you get a funny feeling, you might take somebody off your altar for a period of time. So believe yourself about those feelings. So
that does also necessarily also mean like you have to have a picture. Like you could also like if you do know their name, like you could write their name down, like sort of place them in the altar. And you mentioned glass of water. Do you need a glass of water for each ancestor, or is the one glass of water enough for?
Great question. One glass of water. Yes. So if you have names, you can just write those down. If you have pictures, this is important. If you have pictures, you want to make sure there's no one who's currently alive in the pictures. You never want to have people who are alive on an ancestor altar. No. And generally, we're talking about direct. So parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, so forth. And, you could have like a satellite altar for aunts, uncles, other relationships. But This one is direct lineage like that. So then you want to have a bell because spiritual realms operate at different frequencies. So a bell is a way that we call and we say, hey, I'm knocking on the door. Please come to the door. Greet them, call their names, give acknowledgement, gratitude, and pour the water. Iba. So I'm giving this to you from the Ifa tradition. Iba, that's IBA. Iba Egungun, ancestors. You can say to my ancestors, whatever you're comfortable with. You're going to touch it here and then you pour. This is your signature, and then you pour. You're going to light the candle. If you're home, leave the candle burning till it burns out. Never blow out a candle on a spiritual altar. You always snuff it. Never blow it out. That's important.
What's the thinking around that?
Because snuffing it maintains the energy, whereas blowing it out, like for example, if you've included prayers as part of the lighting of the candle, right? Like please help so and so, and you blow it out, that's the end of the prayer, basically, in a sense, right? Like it disperses the energy, whereas snuffing maintains it, it contains it. So that's why. And if you're leaving and you let it burn for a little while, snuff it out before you leave, for safety reasons. And you sit for 15 minutes after that, because it's one thing to give. You got to give them a chance to give to you as well. You got to receive. You've been the giver, now you're the receiver. This is how we cultivate the relationship so that you can hear all of the things that are coming in, so we can cultivate that inner voice, inner hearing, that inner clarity. So that's very important as well. The sitting is essential. Don't be one of them people that done set the altar up and you done the things, but you don't sit and then you're like, nothing's happening. No, don't let that be your story. Sit 15 minutes. That's very important. And I guarantee you will have experiences. So thank you so much, Eshin.
Yeah. Where can folks find you? Is there a new project that you're working on? Or
Yes, you can find me at Evolutionary Heart. Don't look for me anywhere else, basically, because I'm not really on social media like that. Please, evolutionaryheart.com. You can send me a message through that portal, see a little bit more about me. If you would be interested in a divination, let me know. You can also hit me up on my line, 413-376-5477. That's out in the public sphere, so I'm telling you because it's already out there. And yeah, if you're interested in learning more about any of it, Ifa, Sufism, just talking about spirituality in general, ancestors, bodies, what it is to be embodied, and anything, that strikes your fancy, please come on through. I do have a project that I am birthing into the world called Dispatches from a Deep Past, which is my work about pain, basically, what it is to live with pain and what does pain teach us, what can we learn from our pain. And so stay tuned. I'm going to be actually posting some alerts about that soon, but it is going to be a performance and also a place for you to read the written piece as well. So stay tuned, and if you're interested in possibly being interviewed about your experience of living with pain, get in touch, because I'm also wanting to build an archive.
Nice. Well, you heard it here, folks, and thank you for tuning in, and Tina, thank you so much for giving me your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ashton.
Folks, stay curious and be compassionate to each other. See ya.
Bye.